Well, good morning, golfers, and welcome to episode 7 of Better Golf with Kevin and Jake Haime. I'm kind of laughing because we're in our beautiful studio here, Jake. We've just watched the Memorial. We watched the Ladies U.S. Open, or the Women's U.S. Open, and we're getting ready for our Canadian Open up here in Canada and the U.S. Open, but it's sleeted this morning. And it's
wild.
Yeah,
June 3rd.
Yes, 6 Celsius today. We've got, what do you call that? Is that metric system? You call that the metric system instead of Fahrenheit? We've got
Celsius?
Yeah. Do you convert?
No.
Are you inch and you do inches and I mean golf is still imperial, so
Yeah, okay. So I use inches more than I use centimeters, and I would use yards in golf, but I never think Fahrenheit. I would always think Celsius weather-wise.
You don't think centimeters and decimeters, do you, when you're measuring something?
No, not really. Not really. I tend to think. I think
How
just
long
because
does that take? I was a kid. Pierre Trudeau was our prime minister who brought that in. I think it was early 70s, maybe even late 60s.
I don't know that if we don't think centimeters in our measurement now, it'll ever happen because I'm the generation that grew up with it. I literally think it's because our culture and our media is Americanized. Everyone talks in inches, so I just kind of kept it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still switch over the weather all the time. I know 21's pretty good, and 25's getting hot, and 30's hot, and 35's crazy, and 40's really annoying. But I still go, okay, 21, 42, 38, 70.
That's funny.
I still got it. Yeah, I still do that. Anyway, we're now sponsored by the Weather Network, as you can hear. So, no, we're not.
Yeah.
No, we're not.
No, we're really not.
I mean, it's so topical right now in Canada to talk about weather a little bit. It's literally, I'm looking at my screen on the car this morning. It's 6 Celsius, and it's pouring rain sideways. And I just talked to our maintenance fellas out in the field and the landing area, and it's sleeting on them this morning. So here's our quandary in Ottawa, Canada right now. We can't get the golf balls up because the mower, and we've got a big Sidewinder Toro mower, but whether you have a John Deere or whatever, it's getting stuck in the mud. It's too heavy. So we can't cut the grass, and the balls are plugged in the grass. So now we're whippersnipping, we're string trimming.
Yeah, giant swaths of grass.
Of grow-ass? Of grow-ass. We're string trimming giant swaths of area to try to get the balls out that are plugged in the ground. And anyway, it's been an extremely difficult spring. So here we are. It's kind of weird. We're heading into third major. It's still a little weird.
You know what, though? I like it. I do think I like it. I think having a major season and have it be a little more consistent in terms of how much time is between majors. I'm actually finding I like it. It is weird that we're about to hit the U.S. Open. We just had the PGA, and 3 are going to be done by the time it's mid-June.
Well, 4 by July. I find it a little strange. I don't know what's going to happen. I got a radio show to do. We've got a podcast to do through September and October and November. And
there'll be lots to talk about.
I guess so.
It'll be interesting to see if this does elevate the FedEx Cup as they hope it will, because that'll be what happens in August, right? We'll miss the PGA Championship, but you'll get, and then there'll also be a bigger gap between the Presidents and Ryder Cups than there are between the season. That's not a good thing. I don't know. Yeah, it'll really change the dynamic. I don't know how that's going to work, but I mean, it's first year, and so far I'm actually enjoying the major season.
Did you get to see anything? Did you watch the Women's Open? Did you watch Memorial? I saw a little bit of the Muirfield there.
I saw sneak peeks on social media throughout the day, and then I watched a lot of stuff last night to catch up a little bit of what happened.
Patrick Cantlay got the job done. That was interesting. He kind of folded at the Masters, hit that really weak iron on 16 when Tiger was charging. He's a phenom. He went to UCLA, and I don't know if you remember, I think he went to Hartford. Was it in Connecticut? And shot 60 or something in his first PGA Tour event. The kid is a thoroughbred. And I always tell everybody I like Ricky Fowler's putting stroke the most. It's the most fluid and natural and rhythmic.
Cantlay's is pretty close.
Cantlay's it's a little different. I like Ricky Fowler's. He holds his elbows in and lets the toe swing a little more.
A little more Stan Utley.
A little more, a little more face rotation. You're saying Fowler's is.
Yes,
yes.
And
Cantlay's is a little more like Aaron Baddeley has a buttery stroke too. but he's just he rolls the ball beautifully. And it was interesting this week. I think Jack Nicklaus's impact on the game continues to astound. He had a little chat with him, and it's amazing how many of these young guys are going down to the Bears Club in Florida where Jack is, and just taking the chance to have a chicken salad sandwich or whatever with him and getting little pearls of wisdom. And I guess on Friday, Jack was in the locker room with Cantlay and just said, look, I'd like to see a smile out there. Take the time to look around with a few holes to play and see how much fun everyone's having, and then you start having a little fun. And then, boom, he does it and wins his second tour event in style, making that putt on the last hole.
Well, and a bogey-free 64 at that course on Sunday is very, very, very impressive. Yeah. I mean, that is quite the round to put together.
Yeah, Tiger had it going. Tiger was close.
Yeah, he was 7 under after 12 for 12 on greens. And I mean, he looked like he was awesome. I don't think no matter even if he hadn't petered out, he was ever going to get low enough to have a chance. However, that's trending in the right direction each round going into the U.S. Open.
Well,
and
he's trending at least.
Yeah.
Between the Masters and the PGA, there was no trending because he didn't play. That was really stupid.
I going into the PGA, I was of the opinion that Tiger knows his body the best, knows what he should do, and I didn't think it was a problem that he didn't play.
Mistake.
Then when we talked about it after, I started being convinced, and after seeing it this way, or this week, I apologize. I think you're 100% right that him playing this week and getting sharp and having some process and improvement throughout the round shows me that he definitely should have played between the two and that this was the right decision to play in this one. And I mean, he was better strokes gained in every category round to round.
A little ode to Jack Nicklaus for a minute. Can I jump in?
Of course.
Give you an ode to Jack, then we'll move on from the memorial. But Jack Nicklaus says a lot of things. He talks softly, but says really impactful, smart things. I'm amazed at the guy and always have been. And for young listeners or viewers or however you're watching this, I wanted to bring a little bit of Nicklaus trivia. I like to do this every year on my radio show, too. So Jack, 18 majors, of course, 19 seconds, which is amazing.
It is.
In the Open Championship, listen to some of these stats. Between 1970 and 80, Jack played in 11 Open Championships. Every one of them was a top 5.
That's remarkable, especially because at the time he wouldn't have had a lot of chances to play those courses repeatedly in a year.
19 runner-ups in majors, 46 top 3s, 56 top 5s, 73 top 10s. So I think he played in 140-some majors consecutively. He's got 73 top 10s, half of them.
Very remarkable.
And 95 top 25s. So it's an unbelievable career, and it's an unbelievable legacy he's left. And I love the fact that a lot of these kids now, so Cantlay, I mentioned earlier, is a California kid, but he moved down there, and Rory McIlroy's down there.
Yep.
And I mean, there's a lot of great golf in that area. Greg Norman's down there. Tiger Woods is down in that area now. Between medalists, and there's a lot of great clubs down there, but I think Jack's a real draw, quietly, right? And a lot of these...
I think he's an Arnold Palmer-esque figure at the Bears Club, or at least he's slowly turning more and more into that.
Oh, he's equally what Arnie is. I think Arnie was more an autograph guy, but I don't think you can say Jack's turning into Arnie. Jack...
Well, no, but let me clarify. I think he's becoming more accessible, right? I don't think Jack Nicklaus as someone who's accessibly around and is someone you can get to at a golf course, where Arnold Palmer's legacy largely was his contingent at Bay Hill.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And I think that it appears, based on a lot of these players starting to have more interaction with Jack, that he's filling that role a little bit as the mentor that Arnold Palmer was, which only adds to his legacy. I mean, Jack and Palmer aren't the same person, clearly. They have very different legacies in golf, although both great. But I think it's very interesting that Jack seems to be filling that gap a little bit with Palmer's absence. I don't know if you agree with that, but to me, that's my perception of it. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Yeah, I don't think Jack's ever going to be the everyman's out shaking hands with everybody. He's more of a low-key guy. Yeah, they're just different people. It was kind of like that when they came out on tour, right? When he came out on tour, he was very awkward, a lot like Patrick Cantlay. Too serious, overly serious, not a lot of fans, just getting the job done, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying Cantlay is anywhere near the talent that Nicklaus was, but Nicklaus came out there. He was this big they called him the bear. He was like a big old bear, and he wore a bucket hat. Tony Harris, I had him on the radio show this weekend. He made me laugh on air like crazy. He said he was like Jackie Gleason. I
I heard that.
You'd have to be pretty old to relate to Jackie Gleason, but he just came out there, and Arnie was the matinee idol. It's like,
I think people forget. I mean, obviously I wasn't around for it, but I've heard it several times. People forget that Jack wasn't loved on tour right away because he was kind of taking down Arnie a little bit, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate
absolutely.
that.
People loved Arnie, and Jack was a great sportsman, but people just didn't want anyone to take down Arnie. And Jack did it easily. I mean, it wasn't close. Once Jack came on the scene, it was over.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree with that. I think the other thing, it's been interesting to watch, how this event, despite, its place in the schedule and now being sandwiched between some majors, has kept its legacy because of Jack.
Yeah, respect. That's respect.
For sure. It's the same as Bay Hill, right, with Arnold Palmer. But, I think they put on a really great event. Jack hosts wonderfully. Like, I think this is way better than Tiger's event.
The milkshakes are great, apparently. This is one of the big
Oh, really?
deals. It's funny how things get famous. Oh, yeah, they had him in the tower. Faldo and Jack were sucking on milkshakes there in the tower, so that's a big deal. That's what they're known for at Muirfield Village for the players, is these milkshakes that they make.
Oh, God, I hadn't heard that. That's funny.
That's neat, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, and the women's U.S. Open was on. I didn't grab me. I guess I'm just watching Brooke a little bit more, and I was really busy this week, but I didn't see a shot of the U.S. Open, so I don't think that says anything. It was a terrible week for Hank Haney this week.
Yeah.
Those crazy, stupid comments, but the ladies' game, I don't know, it just didn't capture me this week. Some weeks it really does. I love watching it. I think Haney was way out of bounds, but I do find it kind of ironic that a girl named Lee won after his comments last week, right? It's kind of there's an incredible talent base of young Korean and Asian players. I think it's a positive. I mean, it's growing the game like crazy.
It's undeniably a positive, and I do agree with some people's comments that it's a little harder to relate to as Canadians, to a culture we don't understand as much. But, I did a little looking into her, or Junggeun last night, looking at her Lee 6. And I mean, the reason why there's a 6 on her name is because she was the 6th person
Lee.
with that name on the Korean
You
tour.
see, Hank made a comment last night.
Yeah, terrible. That was stupid of him. I mean, he apologizes when
he apologized, and it was just starting to go away, and then he
dug his hole again.
Yeah.
But I was saying,
keep pulling me back in.
What I was saying
pulling
about
himself
her,
back in.
I read a little bit about her, and she actually has embraced the idea and has people. She goes by 6 now, and I think that's a baller move.
Yeah, I think she calls her. It's a baller move. I think she calls her fans are called the 6-pack. Like she's.
I think it's fantastic, and for
we
me,
owe it to ourselves. The old. I saw a neat thing on. What was it on CBS this morning? Yesterday, Mindy Kaling. Mindy.
Yeah.
The Mindy Project. Who was a young Indian girl, and she was saying her writer's table, like she's got a new movie out about writing, whether it's Saturday Night Live or whatever, sitcom, whatever. And she says, most of the writer's table, the premise is, the old white guys sitting around the table are all the same white guys, produce all the same jokes. And the more diverse your writing room is, your writing table,
you give
the more
opportunity.
interesting. You're getting all these different perspectives, and
Agreed.
I think we should look at the LPGA Tour like that. Like we've got these incredible stories coming from all over the world. Whether it's the Lexi Thompson thing. How many U.S. Opens did you say she's played in now?
Well, she this was her 46th round on Sunday.
Are you sure?
I'm
She's
positive.
Only 24 years old.
I'm positive. So that means she's played a minimum of 12 U.S. Opens and missed the cut on one of them.
So she started at age 12 or 13, I guess.
I mean,
or
she must
missed
have
one in there. That's unbelievable. Then you got the Brooke Henderson story, and you've got there's just intriguing the Michelle Wee story, the Lexi Thompson story. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to embrace it. It's a good, thoughtful moment for all of us to say that is. I mean, what Hank Haney said was so ridiculous. But maybe we all maybe I kind of thought a little bit like I can't engage with many of those players, right? I don't have anything in common with them, and you don't really try. Instead of doing a little reading or watching them a little bit, getting to know their personalities and enjoying it.
It is inherently harder for all of us to relate to people who aren't similar to us, right? That's why we tend to like Canadians on the tour, because we're Canadian. You just inherently connect with that person. So I do think that, this is an interesting opportunity. You're right. It's a bit of a moment of
It's
reanalysis
sort of a
in it.
reflection for me a little bit.
But I actually think, I mean, there's so many great LPGA Tour players. The more ridiculous part about that comment was how much he dismissed the ladies' game, considering how many great players
I
they
love
are.
watching the ladies' game. But I'm a little guilty. I can tell you there have been a couple of times where I'm announcing who's leading the LPGA, and it's a Korean girl who I don't know, and I haven't paid attention to and I'm kind of half mispronouncing her name, right? Because I haven't even bothered to check going into making that quick little announcement on the show. So it's good. It's a good moment for all of us to reflect and see where we are. Great job bringing up the Canadians. Canadian Open coming up this week. We've got 20. Now, I read two different things. I don't know which is right. 20 or 21. I'm from, the last 15 years on the radio, it was Stephen Ames, Mike Weir, and a couple of young amateurs who got sponsors exemptions. Bunch of nothing, really. And I don't mean anything against David Hearn, who's been there lately, or before that, the Nelford and the Haldersons, but it's been a sad era for the Canadian Open. That 63-cent dollar that kind of made the purses low, and then the lousy placement on the PGA Tour.
That's one thing I like.
The combination of those two things, it really lost its way. I mean, when
I would agree
Lee
with that.
Trevino won the Triple Crown in 70 or 71, I think 70, where he won the British, U.S., and Canadian, it was a huge deal. The Canadian Open was almost the fifth major before the Players' Championship existed.
Well,
right? I think the Players' Championship started in 74, if I'm not mistaken.
And what's really interesting is in the women's game, it is considered one of the top events.
Well, no, but it lost its major championship. The DeMaurier used to be a major, and now it's not. So
agreed.
Same thing. A lot less though in the ladies' game, but it's really the dollar and the purses, right? The reason I don't think it kind of sank as much in the women's game is that purses aren't as big. There's not as big a discrepancy.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's probably true.
Masters is 12 million. We're still only 7.8 million. But anyway, it's back. We've got 20 or 21 players. Corey Connors, Mackenzie Hughes. I mean, you can name a bunch now who have a shot. Adam Hadwin, obviously.
Yeah. For sure you can. I think there's a lot of
on the shelf. I mean, we can just keep going and going and going, naming them all. But Weir's playing better a little bit. I think the Mike Weir effect, the baby Weirsies, we see them now. And I think all these other players are going to spawn more. It's almost like the growth of it multiplies, right? Now you'll have little Mackenzie Hughes fans, and two of those will show up.
It's probably similar to Norman in Australia. You think of, for the population, how fantastically Australia performs on tour. And I think there's a similar effect starting to come here, which is awesome to watch. And I think you're right. I mean, you've seen 3 players who have a very legitimate chance to win, all have won in the last couple of years. And, I mean, it could be a phenomenal tournament to watch. What was it, 1954? The last Canadian
Pat Fletcher,
one?
But Pat Fletcher was born in Britain. I think it's back in the 20s since a Canadian-born Canadian won it, which, Brooke won last year, won the Ladies Canadian Open, and it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
I'm not, crossing my fingers and toes for that. It'll happen. It's just a numbers game with all the great Americans coming up here and the world of golf descending here. The odds of a Canadian winning it are slimmer. I think we'd have more Canadian winners if it wasn't a tour event. It was a smaller, B-level type tournament. But
sure.
They got to beat the best in the world, and the best in the world
especially this year.
So Team RBC, we gotta say a little bit everything they're doing with Golf Canada, everything that Team RBC has done for golf in general, and I know they're branding themselves into the U.S. Or themselves, and they took over the Heritage event and saved it. It was on its last legs the week after the Masters, and they're kind of saving it. They've got the Team RBC thing with Matt Kuchar and Jim Furyk and Dustin Johnson and Morgan Pressel, and they've got I don't know how many athletes. I think upwards of 6 to 10, and then they've got 12 Canadians, including Brooke Henderson and most of the top players. Corey Connors, I know, is on Team RBC. Brant Snedeker's another one who's won the Open. Jim Furyk has won it. Graham McDowell. So they're doing amazing things. And now with this new placement, guys warming up the week before, and with the Raptors, of course. Did you see last night? Sergio Garcia and Rory were there.
Yeah, very cool.
They were both there. Barack Obama was there. I love the fact that it seems like everyone wants them to win. Even, this We the North thing is, obviously, it's huge in Canada. But I almost think Americans are tired of Steph Curry's dynasty, and they're kind of cheering for the Raptors.
Look,
it's a neat element.
I know this is a golf podcast, not a basketball podcast, but I mean, watching last night was so frustrating because Toronto was so good on defense, but they couldn't make anything. So I still think they still got a shot, and it would be really cool to see them do something here, considering,
Well,
you're right,
they've
the
already
backing seems to
done
be behind
something.
them.
I mean, making it into the finals and going this deep into the playoffs is phenomenal, and it's great for Toronto. Toronto, with the Maple Leafs, haven't been able to ever do anything. But anyway, back to golf. Rory was there last night. Rory missed the cut, so another guy who won't be a favorite necessarily at Pebble Beach. I don't know what's wrong with that guy. Like, he won Bay Hill, and it seemed like this was going to be his year again. He just finds ways to not be the guy. However, it's going to be awesome. I've played Hamilton Golf Club. Robbie McDonald was the pro there for years, and actually he was an assistant pro when I was a kid at the Hunt Club. He worked for your grandfather at the Hunt. So I went down and visited Robbie and played that track. It's a Harry Colt design. It belongs on the world stage. And, one of the reasons I think that the Canadian Open has come back, so no question the money and Team RBC bringing the big players.
Yeah.
In. But also since they started moving it around to Royal Montreal was the first move. St. George's is another course that's a top, in my opinion, 50 in the world. But this Harry Colt design is really a special piece of property, and it's got a feel to it when you're even walking around the club. The clubhouse is old. It's got that, like Royal Ottawa would be an example here. Like if you think of those Tudor style, like Wingfoot has, those old clubhouses. It's got that
I know exactly
feel
what you
to it,
mean.
right?
Yeah.
Not the Jack Nicklaus modern-looking clubhouse at Glen Abbey or at Muirfield Village. And then you wander around, and there's acorns under your feet, the giant oak trees, and the conditions are immaculate, and the trees are huge. And you get out onto the golf course. The first couple of holes are a little bit flat, but then you start meandering into these valleys and up hills and around. It's a fascinating piece of property. You've got uphill dog legs with little greens. You've got multi-level big greens. You've got downhill sweepers. The 18th hole, I was talking about that on the radio as well. I distinctly remember playing that hole, and you rip it down the fairway, and you've still got a hybrid in. If you try to go for it, I think it's 300 yards now to clear what looks like a little raised creek down there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of junk down there. They call it the bogey bunker and a little creek, but then it's got that Riviera kind of amphitheater look around it's an unbelievable hole for a golf tournament. And I remember playing it distinctly. And Harry Colt, they designed these guys designed so many awesome courses. When you talk Tillinghast and the golden age of design. I think we're in a second one now though with Coore Crenshaw and Tom Doak, and I think we're in a second golden age of design. But those courses designed all around the Northeast in the early 20th century, the 1900s, by the likes of those type of designers are fantastic. And this is a really good golf course. The guys love it.
You know what? I don't know the course that well at all. They haven't been there in a time that I've watched closely enough to really know the golf course. I haven't had the fortune to play it. I've obviously heard wonderful things. It sounds like it's going to be great. I'm actually excited to watch because I think for those of us who don't know the course that well, it sounds like it's going to be a great venue. And hopefully, if it goes back there a bunch, I'd like to be more familiar with it. So I'm excited to see the course a little bit.
And it's going back to St. Andrews, St. George's.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a few different looks at these great courses. But the problem with moving it around to other great courses in Canada, and there are many, like Cabot Links and Cabot Cliffs, but how do you put the infrastructure for a PGA Tour event or a big event, a national open like that? So we're a little limited. In today's world, you need the giant media tents, you need the parking space, the busing, you need everything to make something like that happen. But this is a good one. It's going to be a good week, and because it's the week before the U.S. Open, we've got a great field. Brooks Koepka,
it'll
Dustin
be
Johnson,
really cool.
Rory McIlroy,
Justin
Sergio
Thomas.
Garcia, Justin Thomas is committed. All the 20 or 21 Canadians looking forward to it.
Oh, it'll be a great event. More excited to watch Canadian Open than I have been in years.
All right, let's get to teaching a little bit. I want to talk U.S. Open a little later, but
For sure.
I'm a little itchy here to talk about just helping people play better golf. That's the name of this podcast. We're doing a little feature on the radio show again called Lessons from the Fitting Tee. It's amazing how we keep giving the same lessons every year. I mean, people, I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's like keep your head down, keep your left arm straight, move the ball back in your stance for shorter clubs. You can't get rid of these things. They're like cockroaches. They won't disappear. And the ideas around ball flight and the ideas around how you buy your equipment. If I see one more person with a super lightweight shaft and a spinny driver that's 46 inches long, I'm going to scream. You know, people need to really understand that they've got to get.
So should I expect to scream at like 4 p.m. today?
Yeah, another scream and another scream and another scream. Hang on, I'm turning off. Everyone hear that dinging in the background?
I know we were so good to turn our phones off on our computers.
The joys of live anything.
We
here.
forgot our watches.
And my watch. Well, who thought? It's like Get Smart, right? My wrist is ringing. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take it off and throw it so it's not anywhere near us, so it can't make any. No, I better not do that. Okay, so I want to talk this week, and you did too. You actually mentioned it, Jake. We've talked driver fitting, and we've talked weight of shafts. I thought that was a really good lesson last week. Fairway metals and hybrids. It's like the black sheep cousin of the family, or the weird uncle. It just doesn't get enough attention. I mean, it's just something that kind of sits there, but no one pays attention to it.
We'll even look at, we're even somewhat guilty of that. You look at the last couple of weeks of podcasts, we've talked about fitting drivers and making sure you have the right driver to suit your game. We talked about hitting drivers optimally the last 2 podcasts, and not a wood to be mentioned. So I think that, people tend to look at the
woods or metals.
Woods. I don't call them. I will never call them metals.
No?
No.
I don't know. I go back and forth.
I know you do. Why do you go back and forth?
I don't know. I think I'd always call woods, just like I'm always doing the Fahrenheit on the, but on occasion, I don't know. Oh, I think I don't want to sound like the old dude with the, in my day, we hit woods, but so sometimes I think metals, but I don't know what's the norm.
I just think woods, I'm used to saying it, so it sounds better, and I think metals sounds stupid, although I'll end up getting more used to it over time, but I still say woods.
So first comment, the most important thing you have to say about people getting fit for fairways. Let's just call them fairways. That'll make life simple. What is it? What do you see the most when you're out there fitting morning till night? And
I think the most important thing that we'd see the most is you need to make sure you get the right loft for what you're looking the wood to do. I think as a general statement, the companies have made a lot of the 3 woods a lot more aggressive. They're able to do so.
Well, and 4s and 5s and 7s.
Everything. And they're able to do all of this because when you get the center of gravity farther down and back in the head, like we hear about in all the commercials, it inherently launches the ball higher for you. So they can then offset that by making the club more aggressive, which gives you the same ball flight but farther.
Some of it's marketing. What percentage of that's marketing and what percentage is engineering? So that's the old line, right? My pitching wedge, which had 50 degrees of loft when I was a kid, now has 44, 43.
Yeah, some of 43
and they keep saying that, well, with the weight so low and all the weighting at the bottom of the club, the ball balloons unless I bump the loft down. But some of it's, they've also lengthened the clubs. So your 6-iron is really a 5-iron.
Yeah, I think the lengthening point is maybe more a marketing and getting the ball to go farther point. I do think there is the cynic in me that says, yeah, well, they're bumping the lofts to make people hit it farther, so they buy new clubs. But they have been doing it gradually over time. Yeah. And I do think that if you actually look at it, and, as the engineering has been explained to me, there is an effect that the ball flight does change, and people do want to hit their 7-iron, what looks like a 7-iron to them. So I do think there is some valid engineering behind that.
So you'd say the same thing in the fairways then, but the fairway metals, I'm not finding the 3 woods really easy to hit.
Well, have they ever been?
Good golfer.
That's the other thing is, have they ever been? I mean,
yeah, maybe not. I'm thinking back to my old, my old wooden ones, and I'm thinking back the greatest fairway wood I've ever had is a Cleveland launcher. It was a titanium club with a Grapholoid Pro Light about 15 years ago. I love that
Well,
club.
what's really funny is that I love my 3-wood now, but when I turned pro, I used your
Yeah, you
Cleveland.
stole it out of my closet. So it was a really good one. And there have been good ones but you need it to jump a bit. And
Yes,
I'm
agreed.
finding, customers, average players, if you suggest to them to get a little more lofted ones, they're almost insulted. It's like, I can hit the 13, I can hit the 14.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And you have to be a little careful. I think my advice to people is, look, first of all, one place the industry does lie, or one place we think we can do more than we can, and we're wrong about that, is people think they can buy one fairway wood now, one fairway metal, whatever, one hybrid, and then have a 4-iron and hit it all the distances. And there's no
No, you
logic
can't.
behind
Yeah,
that at
no, you
all.
can't.
I mean, you have to decide what you want out of your fairways. You have to decide what you want out of your hybrids. But you don't get everything. You can't hit it all lengths. I mean, replace your 3 and your 4-iron with a hybrid. It's like, what does that mean? You can't hit it 30 different yardages perfectly. Like, if you're super skilled, you can
Sure.
get closer.
Yeah, of course.
but
Yeah, of
most
course.
people can't.
Anyway,
I think people are tending to buy too low a loft, and they have to be careful about that. My favorite thing to do in fitting an average player, so 85 mile an hour club head speed with a driver, average player, 210, 220 off the, is to put a 5-wood head today, which can be as low as 16 degrees, but normally 17 to 18 and a half degrees. My 4-wood in college was 23, by the way, my wooden one. But, to put maybe a 5-wood head, a more lofted club on a 3-wood length shaft, and that gives them a really nice trajectory, gets that ball jumping a bit. The idea that you want less and less and less loft, can I handle this? This would be great because I can hit that one par 5. Yeah, but the other 17 times you're hitting it, it's coming in too low and it's skidding over the green.
absolutely.
So I think
yeah.
people are obsessed with
With
thinking
distance.
about how far they can hit these clubs.
Well, not to mention the other thing for people to understand is you might hit the 5-wood head farther, right? So the thing that you always have to look at in terms of distance optimization is launch angle. So at a certain speed, whatever you swing the club head at, you need to have a certain launch angle to make sure you optimize that distance. So everyone knows, driver's the prime example. If you swing it 115 miles an hour, you need anywhere between a 10 to a 12 degree launch angle, which means the angle the ball takes off at impact, what it starts flying at. And at 65 miles an hour, which is like a soft regular light shaft, you need about a 15-degree launch angle. So
16.5. The charts would tell you 16.5. Just think of it this way, everybody. The launch angles have to increase as the club head speed slows. Very much like if there's less water pressure coming out of a garden hose, to splash the water farther down your laneway, you have to arc it up more.
absolutely.
Right? Because there's not as much pressure. Whereas if it's really coming out of there, you got the nozzle on the end of your hose, you can almost point it straight ahead and it goes to the far end. So that would be the Dustin Johnson speed.
Yeah.
Whereas, the no gun on the end of it just coming out of the hose and kind of ballooning would be, the older person who doesn't have a lot of speed or the really young child. So you have to find that launch angle.
Absolutely. So again, we're not talking about driver, we're talking about woods, but the same premise holds true there too. If you don't hit the ball with enough force to make sure the ball gets up in the air despite the low amount of loft, if you actually put more loft on the golf club and it starts your launch angle at a better number, especially when you hit down on it, which most people do, it will help you make sure the ball flies at the right trajectory. And even though it says 5-wood on it, it goes farther than your 3-wood might. I agree.
Just put the loft on the club.
Totally agree. And I think that's one thing that Titleist does great right now is in their TS woods, and it's been like this for several generations. They put the loft of the club on the head, and that's it.
Yeah,
the starting
which
loft.
is what it should be.
Agreed. If they got rid of the 3, 5, 7, 9 idea, I mean, a great example, Corey Connors, who didn't, come close to winning the PGA at Bethpage, but was incredibly high in strokes gained on his hitting the first 2 days, had a 7-1 in his bag. Because for that course, he found it helped him the most.
Love that. I think you've got to look at your set. I think you need to be fit. I mean, you buy maybe down to a 5-iron if you're a higher handicapper, down to a 4-iron if you're a lower handicapper. But then that 4-iron through driver, you really got to think about what you want in there.
Yes, you do.
You also have to realize when it comes to your fairway woods that landing the ball softly gets points. I mean,
Lots of points.
you have to consider what's important to you. But on tour, this is interesting, Jake. I think this is really interesting and worth mentioning so people pay attention and not be scared to get a little more loft. So keep in mind, you're buying the same loft if you're buying at 13.5 or 14 that Dustin Johnson's hitting with 127 miles an hour of driver clubhead speed. And his clubhead speed, on average, according to FlightScope, is still 121, I think, is the number, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in there. But this is interesting. The driver on average on the PGA Tour, 10.9 is the launch, and with a 3-wood, it's 9.2. With a 5-wood, it's 9.4. With a hybrid, it's 10.2. With a 4-iron, it's only 11. So the balls are not jumping way up in the air with these guys, And if you're trying to hit the same 3-wood that Dustin Johnson's hitting at 9.2 launch.
Yeah, you don't have the force to get it up in the air.
And you don't have the
time.
tee. I mean,
well, that's why the launch angle is
struggle
lower.
with their driver more than their 3-woods because they're longer and the swings are out of balance and the path is wrong. But as a general statement, I have a more difficult time hitting a fairway metal up in the air than fairway wood up in the air. Sorry. See, I'm back and forth. Than I do a driver. It's easier for me to launch a driver up in the air that's teed 3.5 inches up in the air.
Yeah, because you can swing up at it. You can't really swing up severely on a 3-wood because then you'll hit halfway up the ball and low in the face and you won't hit a good strike.
Any recommendations?
In terms of hitting proper
No,
contact?
brands. Even a brand.
Oh.
I think the Cobra ones jump way up in the air, don't they?
I
Does
think
the F9? I know the Max one does.
Yep, I think the F9 does as well. I think, Cobra has that baffler rail system on the bottom of the head that really, really helps people, especially people who are steep, which is most golfers who slice.
Yeah.
With turf interaction. I really, really like that. We use the Ping 3-woods. I really like that because the leading edge is quite sharp. And that's why, I said I used your Cleveland. That's why I switched. Eventually, I found one of the Ping ones I was using I liked, and I switched to it. I actually had the G until very recently, and I switched to the LST, which is a slightly smaller head in the G410.
Yeah, see, I can't get the LSD up in the air.
Sure, but I'd say the same comments about all of the Ping 3-woods right now, which is the leading edge of the 3-wood is very, very sharp, more like a hybrid or an iron. And that, again, for turf interaction purposes, helps you jump it up in the air a little bit.
Yeah, those baffler rails, you're right. I like those on the Cobra clubs.
A lot.
The ball does jump better.
Yeah.
But that's a good example. I have an LS Tech low spin tech head in my driver. I don't have it in my 3-wood. I find I can't get the ball in the air enough. So if I'm going from LS Tech Tour Stiff to non-LS Tech in a fairway metal, maybe the average person should go to more loft even than that, right? I'm taking the LST technology out of there to get the ball airborne. They should be having more loft.
Well, and I'll even comment, I'm a reasonably high swing speed player. I use the smaller head. I like it. Even then, because, and mostly to land the ball in the green softer, my 14.5 3-wood has been lofted up to 15 or 15.5 the entire time I've used it almost.
Yeah.
And it's not even about a launch angle thing in that category. It's about making sure it lands.
They're all sneaking down to 14 and 13.5, and I like 15. I like a little bit of loft on a fairway wood because I want to be able to hit a high cut with it too, to a back right pin or something, right? Here's another interesting number off our FlightScope data, but the women on the LPGA Tour, who I believe their club head speed is about 94 with a driver on at. Well, I don't believe it. I'm staring at it. So it's 94 with a 13.2 average launch off a driver.
Yeah.
They're 90 with a 3-wood with 11.2. So they're hitting them lower. I think people think they hit their 3-woods higher than their drivers.
Well, I think the reason that 3-woods inherently launch lower than hybrid or than drivers is because, like we said, it's on the ground. So there's no swinging up at it. So the launch angle is more purely just the loft.
Yeah, I shouldn't say higher because I think they end up both being around 100 feet.
Very similar, yeah.
Right? And all of these clubs end up if you watch Top Tracer on the PGA or LPGA tours, when they're showing it, they're up in that 100-foot range.
That's another thing that's a really good point. That's another thing people don't think about.
But the launch angle is lower. And if you don't have the speed, if you don't have the nozzle on the end of the hose, if you don't have the water pressure, you need to hit the ball higher. And
So if the pros don't launch the 3-woods higher than their drivers because they're on the ground and not in the tee, imagine you're going to have the same phenomenon happen. And if you need more launch angle than them, especially if you're hitting more down on it. That's another thing, right? People don't really take into account that dynamic loft is a factor here. So dynamic loft is not the loft that the head says. Dynamic loft is the loft you have when you impact the golf ball. And if you hit down on the ball by several degrees, especially with a 3-wood, which most people do, then your dynamic loft is going to be significantly lower than it would be with a Tour Pro. So they're hitting it harder, which will launch it higher in the air. They're hitting less down on it, which will launch it higher in the air. And they need to hit it lower than you to start. So if all of those things are considered, I think it's really important. Again, it's just about finding the one that's right for you. Some people will hit that 13.5 really well.
Are you a proponent of 1 or 2 fairway woods? I guess it depends how far you hit. If you don't hit the ball very far. We've gone to 4 wedges. We've gone to a pitching wedge, a gap wedge, a sand wedge, a lob wedge.
Which you almost need to do.
We've given up. It's the black sheep of the family here. We've given up this other end of our set. You find yourself, if you hit it 225 off the tee, you find yourself at 210. You might have a distance covered because you have one club, but how many times?
Yeah, but you haven't given up the set entirely. I mean, you've maybe given up.
A lot of people only have one fairway instead of 2 now.
Sure.
And they put the gap wedge in to do that.
Sure, but we didn't have hybrids before, so they've replaced the 5-wood with potentially a hybrid. There's no 3 irons. The 4 irons become the 3 iron, and the gap wedge takes the place of the old pitching wedge. So we have with the inclusion of 60-degree wedges. You're right. We've added an extra club in there for many people. So I've never had 2 woods in my bag.
The old 1-3-5-3 to pitch is now driver 1-3-5. I used to sell those fuzzy head covers for $29.
Yeah.
You now have driver, 1 fairway, 1 hybrid, and 4 to gap. And the 4 to gap are bumped stronger anyway, so they play like 3 to pitch.
Exactly.
So it really hasn't changed.
So it's very similar. I think what you are right about, though, is we've all included these 60-degree wedges, which are, for a lot of people, especially if you play on a golf course that's reasonably quick, although this year nothing's quick.
No, they're essential, though.
But they're very so.
Okay, let's not get into wedges. We're not.
No. But it does mean you have one less wood. So to your point, you have to find the wood and the hybrids that fit the gapping you want to achieve properly. I mean, there's a reason I don't have a hybrid in my bag anymore. I was finding that the hybrids now are so good at launching the ball for you to make it more forgiving than those 3 and 4 irons people struggle to hit, that I was hitting a hybrid too far. And with a little bit of the bulge and roll in the face to make sure that off-center hits are more consistent, I was actually finding them hard to hit straight. I was finding them very easy to either draw or fade them.
I agree with that. But yeah, the argument against hybrids isn't that they go too far because on off-center hits they're better than irons. I mean,
no, they go too far because of the engineering to make them more like woods.
Yeah, and I think that's the other part of today's conversation is you have to find a distance you want to hit your fairway and a launch angle and an overall vertical height you want to hit it to land properly to hit the shot you want to hit it. And I just think everybody's trying too hard to think about that one par 5
and
they
they're
might hit in
maximizing.
2. And they're forgetting about all the times they want to hit a soft cut or just put it in the fairway or hit it up in the air because you're downwind and all the different things you could potentially do if you have a little more loft. Right?
Well, so, I mean, I look at my set, right? I have my driver that I love. I have my 3-wood that's a 14.5 that I've set to 15.5 right now. And the reason I do that is because I hit it as far, as I'm able to off the ground. Then I have kind of a choke down 1.5 inches. I call it the Brooke Henderson. I choke down 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
And I hit a little bit of a fade that goes about 245, which would be what my 5-wood would be. So that takes care of that.
Yeah.
And then my hybrid goes too close to that distance.
I don't like that. I'll tell you this, though. I don't like that with a wood for the average person listening because they can't hit that low lofted one and then just back it off.
Good point.
But I do like it for the hybrid. That's the exact advice I was about to give for the hybrid, which is don't get a 4 hybrid if you have a 5 iron and then go to a 3-wood. That's a giant gap in there.
Yeah, there is.
You're better to get a 3 hybrid as long as you can get it up in the air, and most of them are, 19, 20, 21 degrees.
Yeah.
Find one you can get up in the air that goes a nice distance for you because you can choke up and hit it like a 4 hybrid, but you can't hit your 4 hybrid like a 2 hybrid or a 3
great point.
hybrid.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So the advice we give is when you're fitting your fairway metal, get a little more loft. And listen, in today's world, everybody, if you get fitted properly, don't go to the superstore and just grab one. Hit a bunch of them on a launch monitor, and you might find a 5-wood head on a 3-wood length shaft is great for you. You might find you can adjust or have your pro adjust your 3-wood that put an extra degree on it through the adjustable neck mechanism. So you wanna get something that you can hit up in the air, but you still want your distance.
Well, and I also think
But with the hybrid, I think it's skip one. So if you go down to a 4
Probably.
iron, you might get the 3 hybrid. It'll go far, but you can always choke it up and
Yep,
dial it back a
course.
little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, of course. And the other thing I'll say is try, to the same point we're making about woods, try different hybrids to see which one goes the farthest for you. Because again, that loft discussion can be had exactly in the same way about a hybrid. You know,
They
find-
launch really differently, huh?
they do. And I find with a lot of people, they hit a 4 or a hybrid just as, if not farther, than the 3, because for the loft profile they need, the 4 hybrid has just a little more jump.
Now, for that person with the better launch conditions with the 4 hybrid and the 3,
Yeah.
would you put a 3 hybrid length in to give them a little more distance again? 'Cause
Yeah, I think I
do
would.
that trick sometimes.
I think I would. You know, you lengthen the shaft a little bit to give them the best of both worlds. And again, just tell them to ignore the number on the head. The loft is what you need at this length. And if you figure that out, then again, you can gap it beautifully. And even
Yeah.
though we maybe have fewer clubs, or it feels like fewer, woods in the top end of our set, I think you can get the gapping. I mean, look, there's going to be a gap. You're going to have some sort of gap in there somewhere. You have to decide where that gap's going to be.
Yeah.
I do have a gap between my 3 wood and
You
my
have to have a
3
gap.
iron.
You have to have a gap.
You have to have
You're
something.
covering 40 yards here.
Absolutely. And, you're going to have a gap at some point, but you have to decide where that gap should be for you. That could be dependent on what course you tend to play. That could be depending on what shot you like to hit. And then once you figure out where your gap wants to be, you find the wood and hybrids that fit that gapping properly, optimize height, optimize distance based on the loft profile you need. And the reason I hit on optimize height again is because how it lands is also a relevant factor. I think especially ladies, too many of them go, well, I hit my wood really low, but it rolls a long way. And if you're in Georgia or playing Carnoustie, awesome. If you're playing especially
If it's dry
somewhere...
in Georgia, it's not dry in Georgia this year.
Sure. But if you're playing somewhere like where we are in the Northeast right now, and it's really wet, you're not going to get the amount of roll to compensate
Yeah,
for
I
the lack
think
of height
counting
you
on
have.
roll, there's a false confidence there. How many higher handicappers show up and go, I like to hit it low, it rolls a bunch. It
Tons.
might happen on occasion, but get the ball flying as far as you can. Don't count on roll. It might also kick sideways.
Well, not to mention, like you said with the comment on...
and it might plug this year.
True. Yeah, true. Not to mention the thing the point you made earlier about landing it on the green. We kind of briefly touched on that, but that's a very relevant point. One thing I thought from...
See Patrick Cantlay yesterday on 11? He ripped that 3-wood. It was incredible. I think it was 11. And it landed on the green and went right up past the pin. It landed softly, right? So
Yeah.
these guys are hitting it 260 and landing it like it's got a butterfly with sore feet. I mean, it's a fantastic flight they put on that golf ball. But you don't want the ball hitting the front of the green and skirting across the green to the back.
No,
right?
that's what I was getting at. That's one thing that I think it's fun to watch the LPGA Tour at for most of us because it's more relatable. They hit the ball with similar force to most players. Or, if the average man swings at 93.4 miles an hour and the average LPGA Tour player swings at 94 miles an hour, most people who use a generic stiff shaft swing similar speeds to an LPGA
it's
Tour player,
interesting.
right?
A lot of the LPGA Tour players have 7-woods. Corey Connors has a 7-wood. If I recommend a 7-wood to any man who comes on my
Their
team,
ego would be a little bruised.
it's
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
right? That is a
Yeah,
complete
good point.
sexist kind of, I don't know what you call that, but it's just a...
No, you're right. You're
I
absolutely
don't
right.
I don't need a 7-wood.
It's the same thing how we should stop calling it the bloody ladies tees, not because it's PC, but because more people should play from those front tees. And frankly, there are more women that are athletic that should play from the back tees. You should play from the tee you want to play from for distance, not because of what they're called. But to get back to what we were saying about landing. So one thing I was saying about, I actually saw this at Charleston, was that a lot of that course, it's about runoff. So a lot of the ladies, they had to make sure that they hit it to the right spot on the green to have it roll out the way they needed it to roll out, and they were punished for landing it in the wrong spot. And like you said, if you're Patrick Cantlay, the ball stops like a 4-iron with your 3 because you're hitting it hard. But for the ladies, it doesn't because they're hitting it more like most of average golfers do. So if they're having trouble
distance-wise, more solid, but distance-wise.
So if they're having trouble holding some of these greens, especially on a little more of a firm golf course, then you have to look to what they're doing to do it. And they're trying to optimize height to make sure that it doesn't roll as much.
Well,
which is the same thing most golfers should do.
So let's nutshell this. When it comes to your 3
wood, 3 metal, whatever.
I don't know. I'm so confused now. What a world we're living in. When it comes to your 3-wood, more loft is a good thing, and I'd even consider a 4-wood and a 5-wood head on a 3-wood length shaft. But
Totally.
don't forget, you want to hit up in the air. When it comes to the hybrid, you actually want the longer, the 3 instead of the 4, because you can choke up as long as you can get that 3 hybrid up in the air, but you're going to fill that gap that goes up to your 3-wood. That is a big gap from 5-iron to 3-wood. And if you're only going to have one club to fill it, you might want to lean towards less loft on the hybrid, but more loft on the fairway metal.
Yeah, totally.
The
Totally
other
agree
thing I
with
would
that.
say is always remember, golfers, you can always hit it lower by playing it back in your stance a little bit,
Absolutely.
hitting down on a little bit, leaning your weight on your lead leg a little more. You can always hit a little lower.
But it's hard to hit it higher.
If you can't get a ball up in the air, you're stuck.
Yeah.
So if you're downwind and it's important, or you have to bring the ball
That's a
in
great point.
soft,
Great point.
or whatever reason, right? You want to hit it up in the air. If you can't hit it up in the air, you're stuck. So always buy a club you can hit up in the air. I say the exact same thing. I had a big, not to get off topic here, but it's a podcast. We're allowed on occasion. I had a short game clinic this week. I had 8 wonderful people sit here in the studio. Let me see your wedges, everybody. 0 60-degree wedges. 0.
Yeah.
Most women, newer players, but women, I think that's a fair generalization. They've got an S that they use in the sand, and they've got a P that they try to pitch with because it says pitching wedge. And I mean, you don't pitch with a pitching wedge very often. They roll out too much. They were invented and called pitching wedges in the 1920s. Your sand wedge is awesome in the grass. It's just another loft, much like we said in the fairway metals, right?
Yeah.
You just look at the loft. It's a 55, 54, 56
Yeah,
degree wedge.
there's a
Use
reason-
it wherever you want.
There's a reason why our wedges don't have the letters on them, right? We have a 50. Well, I have a 50, a 56 bent to 55.
Well, some
and a
do
60.
still. That's what I'm saying. All those package sets that the ladies go out and buy because, they play a little bit of golf and it's a social thing for them. They have a P and an S.
You're right.
None of them, though, and not only the women, none of the men in this group I had a 60. And it's the same comment. You can always hit it lower by moving it back in your stance. But if you can't hit it high enough, then you've got nothing. So if you've got to stop a ball closely, so they all hang on their back foot and flip their wrist to kind of scoop it up in the air and they scull it.
Yeah, especially
I've seen
because
a million times a year.
especially because those package sets with the really thick soles, you can't. If you flip, it's even more damaging because there's too much back end on
I
it.
don't know why they make all those sets like that. I think because they know that people who don't know anything think bigger is better.
And I also think that on a full shot, bigger helps you hit it farther. So they just make all the irons the same. And that's where, it almost is condescending, not only to ladies, but to any newer players that buy these sets.
I totally
right?
agree.
Where they're like, oh, you need help hitting it. Let's just give you this big head.
Here, little lady, here's a pink set.
We'll talk
And
about
it's got an S wedge in it.
It's so bad. But talk about this for a situation. So I haven't, in the last probably 3 years that I've fit, had a single situation where I didn't recommend buying a more tour style wedge, even no matter what irons they're buying.
Yeah, I agree.
And it all came from the story of mom hitting with. So I tell the story all the time.
of Mom.
So
On our next episode 9, the story of Mom.
No, but look,
what's the story of Mom?
but mom is actually a very good golfer considering how much she plays.
Lisa Haime. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So she plays really well for how much she plays, but she doesn't play very
Shot
often.
81 at Cabot Cliffs last year.
I know. And she
Wicked.
says she's like an 18 handicap. It's a crock of
Cheater,
junk.
cheater.
But the one thing she's not great at
Not
is
a
bunkers,
cheater,
right?
sandbagger.
One thing she's not great at is
Bunkers.
Bunkers.
Sand trap.
And she mostly plays when you guys go either host the Ireland trip or to Cabot, right? So big bunkers everywhere.
Yeah, I was guilty of the same thing. I know the story. So we got her a beautiful, G set or GLE set or
Yeah.
whatever it was, but even those have a little bit of offset and a little bit
If you just get
clunkier
the
sole, right?
GLE sandwich, right?
And Mom opens it up in the bunker, and she tends to lean back. She hits too far behind the ball. I'm trying to get her to stay on her lead leg and hit down through it, but she's
she's
it's her
practicing
old
so much.
pattern. Yeah,
She's
she never
practicing so much.
practices. But that big clunky head either just skips through the sand and sculls that
Yeah.
ball. She's sculled it and hit the lip and rolled back to her feet more times than I can count. And so we finally got her. We went out and got a glide wedge from Ping, which has a much narrower sole on it. It's got the heel shaved away, nicer. The grind on the bottom of the club is so much nicer than just the big clunky thing, right? And yeah, now she's popping them out of there. It's pretty cool.
Total difference. And I didn't even think about it. We always just
Well,
kind
I
of
also, Jake, like a steel shaft in a sand wedge.
for a little more weight
or
and
any
feel.
wedges around the green for more weight because
Yeah.
you're using those green sides more rhythmic-y little
Yeah.
golf swings, so you want a little bit more weight.
Agreed. And anyway, that was to me an epiphanous moment, even just watching how much of a change it made for her of, these graphite shafted big headed sand wedges that you get, especially in those packages that you're talking about, make it so much harder to hit proper shots. I'll even go out to the short game area and I'll demo for people who have these package sets. I'll hit a pitch with my pitching wedge. It goes too low and rolls too much.
Well,
I'll hit a pitch with my sand wedge. It goes proper. And then I'll hit a pitch with their sand wedge, and it flies exactly like my pitching wedge.
Yeah.
And it's because that's what the club's built for.
Yeah, like when I pitch with a pitching wedge, it goes one part in the air, one part on the ground. If I'm 10 yards off the green, it goes 30 feet on the ground. When I use a sand wedge, it goes, 10 yards in the air. It goes about 10 to 12 feet.
Yeah.
So if you need that, it's great. If you need less than 10 feet a roll and you can't open the face because you're not in long enough turf and you need a 60-degree wedge to stop that ball quicker.
Totally agreed.
And just make a simple swing. I think people are really intimidated by the 60-degree wedge because they see Phil Mickelson use it with the full swing and the wrists.
Yeah.
And they I don't know how to use that. I'm like, it has 6-0 instead of 5-6 on the bottom. It's just a club.
I think if we tie this into what we were talking about the woods, if we just erased the names of these clubs, got rid of the fact that it's a 5-wood or a 3-wood, just called it a 17-degree wood, and you got rid of the names on your wedges.
A 55 or a 58.
People call it a lob wedge and they connect it to a lob shot and they don't understand it's just a club.
Yeah,
and if you got rid of that,
people should also understand your pitching wedge has 7 or 8 degrees of bounce on it.
Of
Bounce is not a phenomenon. That's another false thing out there that higher handicappers all think that their sand wedge has bounce and can you use it in the grass? It's designed for the sand.
Yeah.
But your pitching wedge has 8 degrees of bounce.
Your 4-iron has 3 degrees of bounce probably.
Your gap wedge has 10.
Yeah.
And then your wedge has 10 or 12 my 60 only has 6. I like a little amount of bounce on it to use it in tight lies. So
you know what? It's a kind of a neat little story. So I was out on our short game area with Isabella Ferguson, really good young girl player,
kid,
right? Yeah. And she's working on getting her short game more sophisticated now that she's getting older. And I was teaching her to hold the face off a little bit through impact. It's not really important, but use the bounce when she was pitching. It was helping her. She was having trouble in long grass on weird lies.
People dig in a lot.
A lot. So she's using the bounce a little better, and she comes back from an next tournament and goes, yeah, no, it was really great. Thank you. It helped. She was able to figure it out and helped her. So then I'm helping another student out in the short game, and Owen Gorman, who's another kid we coach, comes out to practice. And while I'm helping the gentleman that I'm teaching, I notice Owen hitting these little spinning wedges that I've never seen him able to hit before, and he's using the bounce, and he's kind of doing what I was talking to Izzy about, and I've never seen him do that. And after the lesson, I walk up to him and I go, Owen, where'd you figure that out? I said, you're hitting it totally better. He goes, he went down to Bethpage and he talked to Abraham Answer. And what Abraham said to him, they were just around the putting green, is Abraham said, use the bounce more. He goes, no one does it. He goes, bounce is your friend. All the tour players, it's bounce, 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 bounce.
You gotta understand, even on a fairway, that grass, they might cut it at, 400 or anyway, there's a 1/4 inch, whatever it is, of grass blade, but there's a root system and a thatch.
Absolutely.
Your club will get under that ball. You don't have to worry about a little bit of bounce in your golf club. And the bounce is there. I always tell people around the greens, we're getting way off topic now, so let's jump to U.S. Open in a sec. But if you put your hands too far ahead, you want the bounce. If you get rid of the bounce by moving your hands 6 inches forward, your leading edge digs in and you stub it. The irony, another great irony of golf, things people don't understand, is that when you move your hands too far forward, that's when you stub it. So people will stub a shot and then move their hands even more forward.
Yeah, your club becomes a shovel.
I'll never stub it from here.
Yeah.
But then they dig in even more. Pull your hands back and, believe it or not, let the back edge of that club glide through the turf.
You're right on that point, and you're right that we're getting off topic. If we again say that,
but
the lesson of it is
that's the other fringe fitting area is the wedges.
Totally. So if we accept that, pay more attention to your woods and hybrids than people tend to in their fitting. Pay more attention to your wedges than people tend to in their fitting. Getting a fitting for just those parts of your set is totally worthwhile because you'll be amazed how much it does. But then also ignore what the names of the clubs. Just get the right loft for you.
I think if everybody listening would put a 5-wood head on a 3-wood length shaft and then get a 3 hybrid they can hit up in the air.
80% of the time it would be better, probably.
That would be a nice fit for them. And then everybody needs a 60. the way courses are today. If your greens roll 9 or faster on the stimp meter, you need a 60-degree
Yep,
wedge.
agreed.
And you don't have to hit it like Phil Mickelson
No,
to enjoy
also
it.
agreed.
You can hit it like Steve Stricker, just a little swingy motion, and you'll still stop the ball. And it's an asset. It's another tool in your toolbox.
It's
you
like
need to have it.
It's like a carpenter. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not good at golf. I don't think I'm ready for the clubs." But the amateur carpenter doesn't use bad tools that make the job harder because they're an amateur carpenter. They buy the good tools to make their life easier to help them with their lack of skill.
More tools, less talent.
So if you have more tools in your toolbox, golf is easier, and then you just practice with the tools to understand what they do.
I had that speech too with a different group the week before, and the lady said, I can't hit a 60. I'm not ready for that. I'm still trying to get used to this one. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you just swing it and it goes a certain way. If you had a different club and you just swing it, it goes a different way.
Yeah.
Now you get 2 shots with one swing. You're trying to do everything with one club. So you need the wedges, and you need anyway. The fringe fitting is super important.
Pay attention to it.
All right, U.S. Open, Pebble Beach.
Yes.
Favorite tournament? I don't know. Jack in '86 or Tiger in 2000 at the U.S. Open.
Are both pretty incredible.
Yeah, and Tiger Woods this year at the Masters is now in my top 5.
Yeah, for sure.
And Tiger Woods beating DeMarco and sinking that shot in 16 at the Masters in 05. And Tiger Woods shooting, winning the Masters in 1997. And there's some good ones. But Tiger's going back to Pebble on form.
Yes.
Brooks Koepka's a monster.
Yes.
It's going to be really fun. So I don't want to look past the Canadian Open. We already talked about that. But this U.S. Open, Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth's trending.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, too, is not only is Jordan Spieth trending, but Jordan Spieth is good at Pebble, so he's trending at the right time.
Yeah,
Dustin
you know
Johnson
what?
has
He won
success
at
at Pebble.
Chambers Bay on Poochie greens.
Yeah.
Look for guys who, like Patrick Cantlay's a California kid.
Yep. Good point.
Poana greens.
Good point.
We have Poana greens here in Ottawa. There's a little bumpiness to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain distinction to the blade and the amount they break. There's certain players. Do you know Tom Watson never won in Florida? So
Yeah, I've heard that.
that
Couldn't figure
weird?
out Bermuda.
I mean, and look at him at Pebble pitching in there on 17 to win it. But there are certain guys who like certain green types.
Absolutely.
Tiger Woods is a monster
Great in California. Yeah.
And
Phil
Patrick
Mickelson,
Cantlay, I guess.
Great in California.
Yeah, what's with Mickelson? 79 on Friday and missed the cut.
Hitting too many bombs.
Yeah, he's a victim of his own fun on social media.
I think I'm joking, but I think he is a little bit. Now that being said, look what happened this year at Pebble earlier in the season.
How about a story if he wins his only U.S. I think he's going to go down as like Sam Snead, or they never win that one event.
Yeah.
I think he'll go down as that. I don't think he's going to win another U.S. Open, but Tiger Woods is going to be in there this week. It's going to be really fun.
It'll be very interesting. I think all the players you mentioned have a great chance. I picked DJ going into Bethpage because that course suited him. I'm tempted to actually pick someone more like, Tiger, but someone more like a Spieth, who's not necessarily only the bomber. Because, Pebble Beach, there's a little more openness to that kind of player at Pebble Beach. It's not super long with incredibly thick rough.
Yeah, it's more the modern U.S. Open, which is more like a PGA championship. And it was funny that players are complaining about it a little bit now, that they miss the days of the rough and the narrow fairways. I'm like, give me a break. You hated that.
Yeah.
But, Shinnecock, to me, wasn't even an awesome setup.
No.
They lost the greens again there. The USGA has really screwed up the last few years. Chambers Bay was not a successful U.S. Open. It was too much of a bomber's delight.
Agreed. Despite Jordan Spieth winning, I agree with that statement.
Aaron
Hills.
Too wide. Aaron Hills, another one. I think they're trying to do interesting things here. They've missed the mark at Aaron Hills, at Chambers Bay, at Shinnecock. They need a good U.S. Open.
Yeah, and they just nailed it with the ladies. They nailed it with the U.S. Open that just happened.
Good ones. Pinehurst has produced good U.S. Opens.
Of course. But and Pebble is an incredible golf course. So unless the greens get out of control, I don't see how they could mess this one up. I think also they'll learn from the fact that they've now messed up 3 of the last 4, arguably, and everybody's on them. You saw that Golf Digest article with all the anonymous
No, I didn't.
points.
What?
Oh, Golf Digest came out with an article not too long back with a bunch of anonymous quotes from players. And, a couple of people talked about how some players are ready to skip the U.S. Open after the last couple of U.S. Opens if they did it again, if they screw up Pebble. So I think
They
that
won't, but
no,
I
but
get what they're saying.
but I think that this is a make or break year for the U.S. Open a little bit,
Don't
and the
forget,
identity of the
that
event.
was I mean, I don't think there was enough negative talk about what they did at Shinnecock. They screwed up in 90, was it 94? They screwed up. They wrecked that tournament.
Yeah.
It was an embarrassment.
And they come back
And they did it again.
do it again.
You know?
Yeah, I do think to a
Phil
certain extent.
Mickelson, right? With
I
the
know,
old
yeah.
hitting it off the green.
Saturday
hitting
was
while it's
screwy.
mo-
I
mean,
do
the whole
think
thing was an abomination again.
Yeah, I do think we have to be a little careful before we just listen to players saying the course is unfair and say that they mess up the golf course, because players want to be comfy. Players want to play well. If the course is tough and some players go, I don't like it this way, suck it up and play the golf course. Play the course you're dealt.
Yeah, I don't think.
However, I do think on Saturday, especially last year, it was unfair. Good shots were punished if it wasn't the perfect shot, and that's not fair to the player.
No, even if it was the perfect shot. This is what they don't like. There's nowhere to hit this.
Yes.
You cannot hit this shot. That's what they don't like. Players are perfectly fine if it's a tough course and a fair layout. And that, for some reason, the PGA Championship has gotten that better. Now, I do agree with you. The PGA is okay if someone wins at 17 under. And the USGA want a sterner test.
Yeah.
They want to be right on the edge. I don't know. I don't like those old U.S. Opens when Scott Simpson was winning them and Steve Jones,
Yeah, I agree with you. It was too much of just a straight competition, and it didn't test all facets of the game. I think that one thing that the idea of these U.S. Opens going to courses like Chambers Bay and Shinnecock and Erin Hills is that it forces the players to take different angles from the fairway to the green. So just because you're on the fairway, even though it's wider, doesn't mean you have a good shot in, because you might be in the wrong spot to wind up close to the pin despite the fact that you're in the fairway. But again, it's when those courses then get over-baked out and unfair that doesn't work either. I think Pebble Beach is interesting because Pebble Beach is not
it's gorgeous too.
as much of the angle courses as the last ones they've tried. They have a track record of it being excellent. I really do think they'll have a hard time messing it up, but I do think that if the USGA overbakes the greens and the Poana greens become problematic, that the legacy of the U.S. Open is in trouble here, or at least the identity of the U.S. Open is in trouble here if they screw it up again. That being said, I am looking forward to it like nobody's business with all the storylines going on. Spieth's great there and he's trending. DJ's great there and he's playing well. Koepka is on this amazing historic run. I know Rory hasn't played great of late, but Rory's game totally suits that golf course. And despite the last couple of events, he has played phenomenally this year.
Supposed to be
Woods,
in great
Mickelson.
shape too. I heard on the Golf Channel, someone was out there. I think Matt Janella said it's in perfect shape.
So I'm really looking forward to watching the Canadian Open, but I'm really really looking forward to watching the U.S. Open, and I'm pumped to see what happens. No matter what happens, it'll be a great event, I think.
Yeah, great spot for the Canadian Open now too, and not as great as I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be. I don't know where. I mean, the other thing that's happening with this condensed season is these tournaments. Some of the spaces on the tour, Jake, are being totally ignored.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Tiger plays. He should have played at the Wells Fargo on a great track, and he skipped it. But that's what he would have played it 2 weeks before, and then.
Sure.
He's never going to play the Canadian Open unless he wants a warm-up for the U.S. Open because he's going to play at Muirfield. And so the week before and after that is always going to be an also-ran event a little bit, and the same thing will happen moving forward, right? So we're getting at Tier 1 is World Golf Championships and Majors.
Yep.
Tier 2 is these gaps.
Yeah,
And
Bay Hill.
I think we already know
Memorial,
that. Bay Hill, Memorial, Wells Fargo.
Players.
And then after that, you're going to have the rest of the events, and we're going to lose more and more interest. The PGA Tour has to be careful that we don't lose interest in those events.
I agree with that. I do, however, think that because it's between Muirfield and the U.S. Open, and because of the players that are coming to it this year, Team RBC, the Canadian Open's trending in the right direction, and I'm really excited for what it could be in 5 years. It could be a bigger and bigger event year by year. I mean, I have great memories watching it as a kid. Watching Mike Weir almost win it against Vijay Singh is one of the tournaments I still remember most vividly.
Yeah.
But I think, it has suffered a little bit in the last, we'll call it 5 years. And I think it's looks like it's trending in the right direction
not
again.
5 years, man. No, I don't know about that comment. I think it suffered pre-Mike Weir. 2004 is when it's been kind of trending back and moving it around, and right.
I don't remember pre-Mike Weir. the Canadian Open,
it
right?
was weak there for a while.
I don't really have
Anyway, it doesn't
vivid
matter.
memory of that, but regardless, I think it's moving in the right direction, and I'm excited
Sure
for
is.
that
All right.
and the U.S. Open coming forward.
Anything else? Did we miss anything?
No, I think it's great.
I think we're set.
This
Some
is fun.
great fitting tips today. A little bit of talk of Jack Nicklaus, which is always fun. If you get time, everybody, go to Wikipedia and look at some of the stuff. I mean, he's also designed, by the way, 410 golf courses and has 57 more
Yeah, remarkable.
on the way. And he's got
Yep.
5 kids and almost 30 grandkids and a marriage that's lasted all these
And not to
years.
mention many good golf courses. Saying he designed a lot, but they're no good would be one thing, but a lot of fantastic golf he's done.
Well, 410. Think of a lifetime legacy.
That's a lot.
How long do you think it'd take you to design one golf course? And 410 after being a 72-time winner and an 18-time major winner.
Yeah, it's wild. Very impressive. Very
It
impressive.
is a staggering catalog of a life. Even playing basketball and football in high school and winning the Ohio Junior 4 times. First time he ever played, first 9 holes he shot 50. As a
Oh,
10-year-old.
really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. That's very cool.
Yep.
That's
And my
very cool.
favorite thing, I'll leave you with this, everybody, today, and then we're going to go. Jack Nicklaus, the first time he ever had his swing speed tested. So he didn't have launch monitors,
Yeah, of course.
obviously. He was the bear, and Bobby Jones said he plays a game with which I am not familiar, which is him
love that
saying,
line.
holy crap.
Yeah.
You know, in today, Bobby Jones in today's world would say, holy crap. He was tested clubhead speed at age 58 the first time, and it was 118.
That's
That's
remarkable.
your speed.
Yeah, PGA Tour average is 113 now. With modern
At
equipment,
age 58
modern fitness.
with that.
Yeah.
So what would he have been with a, with a Ping G410 plus?
125 at least. I mean, it would have been wild.
130, I think.
Would have been
too.
impressive. Very impressive.
118 at 58. At 28, what would he have been?
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. 130 wouldn't be crazy. Wouldn't be
Gotta
crazy.
stay in the gym. He's a tiny man now. He
Yeah.
was a bear of him. He's just disintegrated, this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, is that just age with all of us? I guess I'm shrinking. I think
Well,
I'm
I
a
also
half inch
think he's not exactly.
I'm
No
shrinking.
comment.
I'm shrinking.
No, I also don't think that he. I mean, he's also not a great player. Jack has decided he's grandpa now. He doesn't,
Yeah, I
you
don't
know,
think he was
smoking
ever
and
a big
eating
gym
and
guy.
whatever. But
Smoking and eating. That's
but,
his fitness routine. Smoking
but
and eating.
no,
we love Jack
absolute
Nicklaus.
great, absolute great. This was fun. Thank you very much.
Okay, good job.